Welcome to another episode of Rethinking Christianity. I'm Blake.
This is Caleb.
And we're in person. Caleb is back from Italy. He's here in America. So
Yes.
How do you feel being back?
It's really weird. It's really weird being back in the U.S. and eating our favorite foods is great, but there's a lot of other things that just haven't experienced in a while, like really big stores like Target and Kroger and Walmart, that kind of stuff was really overwhelming.
What was the first food you I gotta get?
Chick-fil-A.
Oh my gosh.
We literally had Chick-fil-A twice within our first 24 hours of being here.
Nice.
Yeah, that's one of our main things that we miss.
See, when I worked at Chick-fil-A for a while, so didn't you work at Chick-fil-A?
I did,
okay.
for 3 years in high school. That should be a whole nother episode on how Chick-fil-A ruined me.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've heard it's the Lord's chicken.
Oh my gosh.
I don't even know what that means.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it is really good chicken.
Yeah, it's good.
But it's just such a high-paced atmosphere.
Yeah.
And I think it just taught me to rush through every part of my life. And I didn't realize until I was in
this just got so deep.
No, I know. There should be a whole nother episode, really. Because
we could do a solo episode of like Chick-fil-A and my spirituality.
I think I did like a
blog
Instagram blog last year or something about how Chick-fil-A taught me to rush through everything. Yeah,
that's interesting.
That would be a whole.
I remember when I remember when I was working at Chick-fil-A, our owner came up to me one time and she was like, "Blake, you need to walk with purpose. You need to be like going." She's like, "How do you think Jesus walked?" Yeah. And I was like, I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
And she was like, he walked with purpose. I was like, okay, probably, but like not in this way. But anyways, so today we're going to talk about a subject that's really interesting, I think. It's one that I think Christians and religion in general, people are very familiar with, and that is prayer. So this season we have kind of talked through. The first episode, we talked about like reclaiming faith that was hijacked and how this season is going to be kind of about that, like different things regarding Christianity and faith that have to do with like, reclaiming those things and taking those things back in a way because we understand them from a certain perspective. And I think sometimes that perspective isn't necessarily like healthy or helpful because growing up, we told our stories and talked about how we were given one perspective and one way of understanding Christianity. And so today we're going to talk about prayer. So
when you start to kind of rethink your whole worldview, some of the things that were good about before can seem really hard to continue to carry when you're questioning so many things. And so it can be just really confusing going through this time of reworking what your faith practice looks like to really recognize, okay, these are the things that I do want to carry forward, and these are the things that I need to leave behind. Yeah. But it's hard to carry certain things forward when they're attached to memories or things that you really feel convicted about now. And so that's what we're trying to help clear up is how do we walk forward with a prayer practice that takes the things that we've learned now and that we're learning now, but still contributes to a healthy prayer practice, which is hard to do. It's like worship. We mentioned it in a previous episode, can feel a little bit weird when you have grown up with a certain perception of worship that you don't really like vibe with anymore. And I can't believe I just said vibe with. I mean, who am I?
I mean, that's kind of, it's valid. You don't relate to it. You don't vibe with it anymore.
Yeah. It was just a word that came to me.
Anyways. So I think you make a really valid point of like, for a lot of people, it's like, how do you find these things useful, but disassociate them from the things that you don't really agree with anymore? Yeah. And honestly, I think a lot of it has to do with the type of church that people have been in and how it was presented to them. And what we want to do is present not just one way of viewing it, because the more I've read on prayer, for instance, and the more I've thought about prayer, there's so many different perspectives on that, like from the Catholic perspective, the Orthodox perspective, the evangelical perspective has some good, like there are people that all throughout the Christian history and faith have done really interesting things with prayer. I talked on last season in an interview with Joan Chittister, and she talked about prayer in a very different way in which I had thought about it. So that's kind of what we would like to do in this episode. So Caleb, I'd love to hear how was prayer for you? And then I can kind of talk about that. What the way I thought about it and still kind of think about it.
Yeah, well, so like I mentioned a couple of weeks ago when I shared my story, I grew up in very different variations of or expressions of evangelical Christianity. And so I'd say for the first part of my life, I really viewed prayer as a more of like a discipline, spend this amount of time every day praying for the things that are on your prayer list. And whether that's like a card or you have a list, different people had different ways of doing that. But there were always these regular things that you kind of wanted to keep in mind in praying for every day. Like you hear all the time, like, hey, add so-and-so to your prayer list, or be praying for this person or this situation, And so you you felt this obligation to keep a record of things that you needed to be praying for. So like I had this card in my Bible that I use as a bookmark, and it had a list of things that I wanted to pray for every day. And when I would read through my Bible, I would just take a minute with that bookmark, and it would remind me every day to pray for those things.
Yeah. Which isn't a bad thing.
No, it's not. It's a good thing. And we, that's one of the things though, that it's weird to carry that forward when you have kind of been taught to believe that this list kind of feels like a shopping list in a way, or like a Santa Claus list. And so when you're trying to see prayer in a different way than that's what can be hard about bringing it forward. But I think there is something good about having a rhythm and certain things that we are constantly bringing to light or bringing to the surface to address or to contemplate and think about. Yeah. And then I guess when I got to college and I went through my super charismatic phase, prayer became much more of an active, supernatural kind of thing. There was an emphasis placed on words and what we say and how that impacts things in the supernatural realm. And I mean, even that too, like there is something too about speaking things that I think we can carry forward as well. But it's not as, I think the negative side of it was the way that it was kind of used to manipulate situations, or like we wanted to gain control over a situation or how something was being handled. And so it was more of like, I'm going to pray and prophesy these things so that this situation or this person will change,
Yeah. And I've seen with that kind of thing, sometimes it seems like that puts a lot of emphasis on the person.
Yeah, exactly.
And it kind of sometimes
you're not praying hard enough.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I don't know. I've always struggled with that perspective. But I think like it's just kind of, it becomes like you mentioned, a shopping list in a way. But on the flip side of that, like there is something about like how it can affect your empathy and compassion when you do an intercessory prayer for others and things like that. So I think that stuff is also helpful as well.
Yeah, it keeps your heart soft, and it keeps you in a place of understanding that there's suffering going on around you and in other people's lives, that when you have that practice of going back to that every day, it does sort of put in perspective the things that you're struggling with too. It kind of gives you some sort of solidarity with people, like, and helps you feel less of the center of the world. Like my problems are everyone else's problems and the only ones that should count. When you have that practice of going, of reminding yourselves of things that are going on in the world and ways that other people are really struggling, it does kind of keep your heart soft. And that's the benefit of having this regular practice of prayer. Yeah. It just needs to be, we're just trying to figure out a way to keep it intentional and not let it become.
It's hard because like the way in which prayer, I think I viewed it was like making something happen.
Yes.
Rather than it shaping me.
And convincing God to do something.
And so I think that was kind of something that I struggled with a lot of times.
Yeah, I'm thinking of this story now. I was in Italy one summer, and I was serving at our conference center, and the grass had grown like a lot because the center had been closed all winter. And I've always had really bad allergies, and just the smell of cutting grass can send me in the bed for days. But I was the only one at the center that could cut the grass for the group that was coming that weekend. And I'm in the mindset of, okay, we'll just sacrifice and serve, and you've got to lay yourself down. God will protect you and stuff like that. And I remember like I was wearing a mask. I was wearing a like plastic shield and everything. And the whole time I'm cutting the grass, I'm like, Lord, like just please protect me, like trying to convince him to just not make me sick, because I had so much to do in preparation for camp and stuff. And I just had this moment in the middle of like 15 minutes of, trying to convince God to just protect me from my allergies, where I realized, wait, this is weird. Why does prayer feel like I have to convince someone who supposedly loves me and wants my best? Why do I feel like I'm trying so hard to, make him do something? And why am I talking to him like this? It should be something that's more natural from a place of trust. And I think the rest of that time cutting grass, I actually was just like, okay, this is a weird story.
No, that's funny how this is.
Do you know where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I never know where you're going, so I just listen and observe. So, but I think you make valid points.
Yeah, like I noticed how hard I was trying to make God see my point of view and understand me, when I just came to a place where I'm like, okay, you know what? He does already understand me. He already does want good in this situation. I don't have to try so hard to make this happen,
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of times, like that prayer and it does say in the scriptures, like, make your requests known to God.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you have this balance of like, God is not a genie, right? But also like, you do like kind of open your life to prayer and making requests known and praying for others. And then like what I have struggled with a lot in prayer is like, what do I do when like horrible things happen to people? Like that's where I struggle with, is like I see people praying for others and it's prayer out of love. And then like when God doesn't, quote unquote, I'm not saying this is how it is, but doesn't answer those prayers in the eyes of like logic, it kind of just, I've struggled with that at times. So, and so what I think that for me, I have to think through the lens of like, how can prayer be something that shapes me rather than it be something where I'm expecting something to happen, or I'm expecting God to make something different. And so that's where I've struggled, but like I've had to think through. That's where I found like examine prayers. Those are helpful. Like thinking through like, and it's just reflection. Like, and I think that for me, and maybe for you as a listener, like if you're in the same boat as I am, where you've been like, okay, like I don't see prayer as something that is useful because all it seems like is I'm asking for something and then nothing's happening in return. But what if prayer is more like reflecting, like a reflection and shaping us? And I think that like I said, I do see in scriptures where when it talks about prayer, make your requests known to God, pray for others and things like that. And I think those things are necessary. But what if it is about like when you see someone hurting or in pain, like it's more about shaping your love for them than seeing something change or happen. I know that's kind of weird I don't know, that's the way in which I've had to think about it lately.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I have felt connected in prayer, it has been definitely something that is interior. It's not been something that's just a hollow practice or something that I just need to do every day. And it's been more transforming and more impacting to me when I have allowed it or gone into prayer without a sort of agenda. That's a good word. But see, that can be helpful, especially when you're trying to start, like when you're starting to kind of center in and go into prayer. It can be helpful to have something that starts that moment, So I use an app called Lectio 365, which which is done by 24/7 prayer. And it's kind of set up as like a basic version of the daily office. So you've got your morning prayer and your evening prayer, and it's got maybe some quotes from a song or a hymn or something in there. pauses, for reflection. And it has, things that you can read in order to start that. And from there, that kind of leads you into that moment where you're in the interior room, and you're, I'm starting to sound like Joan Chittister, like you mentioned
Bethel?
earlier.
Right now?
Well, I'm going in the direction of contemplative prayer, of allowing space in your moment of prayer for the connection or for reflection, like you were mentioning, the examine prayer of looking inward and connecting with love and with compassion. Versus, something that's more heady.
Do you feel like that's a more compelling way to approach prayer?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's what I think is like, that's what we're trying. Like, I hope that if you're listening and you're thinking through prayer and you haven't really maybe discovered some of these different approaches to prayer, that you would check them out. Because I think for me, this stuff, there's more compelling ways to approach things. And something I was thinking through is like, I think a lot of people don't like praying because I don't think, at least if you've listened to the last couple episodes, you've heard our background. And so in the evangelical world, prayer is like kind of approached in a lot of different ways, but it's honestly like, it's kind of like giving people like a stick shift car and never showing them how to like drive it. And so you don't really know what to do. And so like, it's like, all right, just go pray. And so I've felt like that has been kind of like difficult for people, because do you feel like you were taught how to pray, really, or given different perspectives growing up?
Yeah, I mean, you're taught the little acronyms, and you're taught how to make your list, and you're taught that, well, the Lord's Prayer is how we're taught to pray, and that's helpful.
I do like that prayer.
I do love that prayer.
Yeah, Jesus
and
did
that
a good
is
job on that one.
Yes, that is Jesus did a good job on that one. It definitely is something that is one of those things, like I was talking about, that leads you into where you want to go in prayer, which often for me, I think is silence. And, I really love the idea of meditation, and I love using the app Headspace, because it is, I think for me, about coming to a place of silence, and inner peace, inner tranquility, where I can actually meet with God there. I'm trying to find a quote from Mother Teresa that I heard the other day. I don't know if you know the one that I'm talking about, but I'll just paraphrase it. But she was asked one time about what her approach to prayer is. And she said that, well, I go to God and I just listen, And then they said, well, what does God say back? And she said, he doesn't say anything back. He listens. It's not really about this big exchange of words, or, it's, you don't even need to go into it expecting to come out with some sort of thing. I think that's when you will turn it into agenda.
Yeah.
It's more about just coming to a place of quietness so that we can see whatever it is that needs to come up.
Yeah.
It's more of an exploration thing for me now, of exploring my soul.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that you mentioned like that, like I think that's helpful for people. It's helpful for me. And I think it's like, how do we go into prayer without expectations?
Yeah.
And, or the right kind of expectations maybe, or just like a different way of viewing it. When I think of like the Lord's Prayer, I feel like the Lord's Prayer it has a lot to do with like, and I don't know how to word this right, but it has a lot to do with us and our heart. So like, our Father who art in heaven, holy is your name. Like that, it begins with like approaching God. Yeah. And I like these different like it begins with addressing God. And I like these different kinds of like, you have the Lord's Prayer. Have you ever used like, I think I've mentioned it before, the Jesus
Prayer, yeah.
Yeah, I have like this little bracelet where like, it's like kind of like a rosary or whatever, and you can like say different prayers as you're going through the knots on the bracelet or whatever. But like, the Jesus Prayer is a great one. And I think that, if you're someone that you don't really know what to say when you pray, finding prayers like that are helpful.
Yeah.
Like, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And like, I've even seen where people use that prayer as a form of like they use it with their breathing.
Yeah.
Have you ever read about that? Like
Yeah.
so you breathe in like Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, and on the exhale,
And you
have
exhale.
mercy on me, a sinner.
Yeah, Lectio 365 has something like that every now and then, and that's connected to so many different traditions. The use of breath in prayer is used in a lot of different religious traditions, especially Eastern, forms of meditation. It's there is something physical about the breath that does bring the body into a quiet place. I mean, therapists are learning how breath affects anxiety and depression, and how it physically does something, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. There's something about using breath. And so when we learn how to incorporate breath into our prayer practice as well, it's merging practice with spiritual connection,
Yeah. Yeah. And also I feel like when you think about it through that way, like you should because life is so like fast paced and hurried. Like you should be able to like use prayer as a time to like just stop and be able to actually like, I feel like you should be able to relax before God.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that makes sense, but like you should not be so tense and tightened and like just bottled up. And so I think like for people that are dealing with mental health stuff and things like that, like if you are someone that wants to pray, like there's breathing stuff that goes along with that it's like historically like has been used for a long time.
Yeah. And something interesting there, when people struggle with mental health, one of the responses that the church has always given to these people is, oh, just pray about it. Just pray about it. But it's like, what does that mean? Because the mode of prayer that they've been given is to go to God and tell him what you want and really hope and have faith that it'll happen. But in this way, if we're approaching prayer as like a calming practice that brings us to, or loosens us and dissolves the tension, things like that, that helps. That really helps people who are struggling mentally. And that's a way that we can rethink how to use this practice moving forward. It's not just, okay, I'm feeling really anxious. God, please take this anxiety away. Yeah, fix the problem, please, because I'm freaking out, But when we learn how to quiet ourselves more and more, and we use that as a rhythm, that's actually effective.
And I've found like the other way of praying, like just praying like God fixes. Honestly, it creates more ruminating thoughts.
Yes.
Like you just are like so focused on the thing you're trying to have fixed rather than just like finding clarity in prayer, like finding clarity in quiet. I've had like moments of prayer where like the silence helped me more than anything.
Yeah.
Like I'll go into like a sanctuary at our church and I'll like just sit in like the quiet, like just be in the quiet.
Yeah.
The world's so loud.
Yeah.
So you got to find these moments. And, so like, I think that's a big thing. I think people don't necessarily like prayer because they haven't been given all these perspectives on like how like this thing can actually be beneficial. So I think, so we've talked about like the idea of like struggling between the tension of like, how do we pray like in like ways where we are making requests because of our concern for others and our love for others, and the tension there. And we've talked about how like there's a lot of people that don't enjoy prayer. I have kind of a little audio clip of like Joan Chittister where she talks about like this idea of becoming a prayer.
Yeah.
And I found it kind of interesting. So I'm going to play that real quick. So I think it's kind of an interesting way of approaching this. So let's check this out.
We do not need to practice prayer. We need to become a prayer. Prayer is more than repetition of formulas of piety or mantras for miracles. Prayer is a state of mind. It's a posture toward life. It is an exercise in spiritual maturity. For those for whom prayer is a way of cajoling our God to love us, whether we deserve it or not, it is a checklist mentality. It doesn't come out of love and trust in God. It comes out of fear that God will come to know us as we know ourselves, and so find us unworthy of an A on God's report card. It makes love some kind of slavery, and God some kind of slaveholder. For those for whom prayer is a kind of magic meant to control God and get miracles. God is a magician who makes red lights turn green so we don't have to stop the car at street corners. It's a very immature notion of the nature of God's presence in our lives. It makes God a kind of eternal narcissist who wants praise and sacrifice, rather than a creator who loves creation and supports it so that we can all know the fullness of it. But for those who become a prayer, who live in constant consciousness and trust in a loving God, all of life is an experience of God. Then every day of our lives we grow closer to the voice of God within us, the sight of God in all creation, the love of God that comes to us through everything we touch in life.
Yeah. So pretty good thoughts from Sister Joan.
Yeah.
Like becoming a prayer.
Yeah.
And I think she kind of hit on some of the stuff we're talking about.
Yeah.
We've already talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. Like embodying the connection that we're seeking.
And I think like what she hit on is like it helps how we view God. Like how like we're not viewing God as this narcissist.
Right.
And I think a lot of people do struggle with that. It's like, why do I need to convince God?
Yeah.
Like, why do I need to like approach God in this convincing
And
manner?
what happens if he doesn't answer my prayers? He didn't listen, or he didn't care about the situation, or he didn't. Yeah, exactly.
Have you ever felt like have you ever felt stupid while you prayed?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, all the time. Sometimes and we've talked about doubt and things like that on here. Like there are moments where I'll pray, I'm like, am I praying to anything at all? So like, I think like, and so, but that reflects of like, it's like when I ask someone, a human, I'm expecting something in return.
Yeah.
If I ask them to do something, and it's like, it just can't be the same with God. Like, you know what I mean? Like it shouldn't be.
Right.
And so like, I feel stupid, not because of what I'm doing, but because how I'm approaching it.
Yeah. Or even that like, okay, I'm asking for something, but God knows the right answer here. He knows what needs to happen, but here I am. And I could be completely convinced in my prayer, but he could be like, well, you silly little human, you don't see what I see, you know? But it's not about any of that, you know? It's about connection and synchronization, maybe is a good word.
That's a big word.
Yeah, connect, you know, because we're syncing our souls and our spirits with peace and with compassion, you know, softening and
and
stability.
I think ultimately if we can approach prayer in a way of allowing it to shape us, and you know, into the way of Jesus, I think that is solid. I think that's a big help for me, at least, and I hope it is for any listeners. So we've mentioned I want to talk about maybe just as we kind of close out, what are some like resources you think? Like I know that we've mentioned the Jesus prayer. That's a prayer people can use. What was the app that you said was
it's called Lectio Divina.
Yeah, and we'll post a link to that. I believe it's in the listen notes. You can type it in on the App Store and find it, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I think they're like, I think Richard Rohr sends out like a meditation every week.
day.
So that's another one you can find. So, and I guess it's every day, but you know, there's a lot of resources out there.
The Book of Common Prayer.
Oh yeah, there you go.
We missed that one.
That's a great one. So yeah, like there's a lot of resources on prayer. So if you feel like you're a person who would like to engage in prayer, maybe as some type of morning, there's the morning and evening stuff that you can find. The Daily Office is a good one. I remember when I was at Rockbridge, they gave us all one of those, and I really enjoyed that. I think it was helpful. So we hope that this episode on prayer, obviously we could go on and on and on, but we wanted to kind of keep this simple and just kind of talk through like our different perspectives on it and like how we have like understood it and viewed it. We hope that it's helpful for you. If you have any thoughts on prayer, we'd love for you to reach out to us on like Instagram. You can shoot us a message. And if you have any books or anything like that you think would be helpful, send it our way because we're always wanting to check things out. Caleb, thanks for talking with me about prayer. I think it's an interesting subject, and it's kind of hard to like talk about it in a compact way, but hopefully we did our best.
Yeah, because the goal here is not to turn it into something.
We're not trying to debate what is
exactly or make it a system, you know, because it's not that.
Yeah,
it's probably desystematizing it.
Yeah,
you know.
And so what we would encourage you to do is, you know, check out the different perspectives on it, check out the different ways, reflect on how you have approached prayer, and maybe how you can change that. So thank you again for tuning into another episode of Rethinking Christianity. Today we're reclaiming prayer. This idea of reclaiming things is the theme of this season, and we hope that it's helping you out. If you want to do us a huge favor by sharing the podcast with somebody or following us on Instagram, that helps other people just like you find the podcast. We appreciate and we love all of you. Have a great week. Cool. Right at 30 minutes.